desert scrub country of northwestern Victoria. It's the scene of the 1977 BP Desert Rally, the seventh event of this nature and Australia's biggest motorsporting event of any kind. Over 400 motorcycles and a couple of hundred four-wheeled vehicles, I hesitate to call them cars, set out on a 320-kilometre trek on some of the worst desert and scrub track I've ever encountered. We contested the event in a Datsun Patrol, and with me as co-driver is Bill Evans. Wild Billy's called, and that alone caused me some consternation. Cars and the bikes start simultaneously on two loops of approximately 80 kilometres in length. The northern loop for the cars in this instance, and the southern loop for the bikes. So we're setting out on loop number one, the northern loop, at the first attempt. We have to do this loop twice. We started very confidently, in fact, and for the first few hundred metres, the roads were pretty straight, fairly level, and not too bumpy. Almost immediately, we started to catch up with a dune buggy who'd begun just half a minute before us, which was something of a surprise. And then, of course, the trick is to pass them. It was compulsory to have a very good set of horns in each vehicle, and you were required to use them extensively if you wanted to overtake. And it was the commitment of the vehicle being overtaken to move over. Meanwhile, the motorcyclists were well into their first attempt at the southern loop, and already bunching up. And already having a lot of fun. With over 400 motorcyclists competing, the competition is really tough, and everybody gets fairly high-spirited about it. This is one of the very few lady riders, and her attention is distracted just long enough for her to be in trouble. But she just picks herself up and carries on as if nothing had happened. More dune buggies for us to pass on a section of Salt Lake, which was also still very fast. Still flat, still not bumpy, and we're pretty unsuspecting about what was to come. What was to come was more like this. Competition is no less intense amongst the dune buggies and the other four-wheel vehicles than it was with the motorcyclists. And very early in the piece, people started to come to grief with mechanical defects just like this one. They're not going anywhere. The cars took on all shapes and sizes, and the Section 4 sedan cars included a lot of pretty old beat-up vehicles that were sort of specially prepared for the BP Desert Rally. And they needed to be. Within the first 5 kilometres of the event, we were in trouble, and our illusions were somewhat shattered by a very simple rollover. The Datsun just got itself into a pile of sand and fell gently onto its side. It didn't take us long to get going again, however, but it was a bit disconcerting, to say the least. We weren't the only people in trouble. The motorcyclists travel at unbelievable speeds. It amazed me at times to watch while they exceeded 60 and 70 kilometres per hour. There's Kell again, intrepid, just going as fast as he can go. There's a class for four-wheel drive vehicles. In fact, that's the class that we were contesting. and the Army took a hand as competitors. We'd recovered by now, but we weren't very fast. I was driving on this first stage, and frankly, that rollover just upset me enough for me to take a good hard look at what we were attempting to do. And it put us behind the other four-wheel drive vehicles, which we now had to follow. The amazing thing about the motorcyclists were that a great many of them came to grief just like that and just carried on. I suppose we did too, but it sort of seems different on a motorcycle. You're so unprotected. See what I mean? No hesitation. This is a passage control. There were a number of them on each loop, and you had to pass through them, pick up a tag, which indicated, in fact, that you were sticking to the right track. We all had fairly firm instructions from the rally director, Mal McPherson, not to go off the beaten track if it was possible for us to avoid doing so. The conservationists were there in force, and they were rather concerned that we might be doing some damage to the environment, and I believe realistically. So at least most of us attempted to stay to made tracks all of the time. Here's the first motorcyclist at the end of his first attempt at the Southern Loop. And here's the first car at the end of his attempt at the Northern Loop. That's 80 kilometres down and 240 to go. And it gets worse, not better.
So I wait 3 minutes.
At the end of each section, the passage control stickers are checked, and we are all put into a holding pattern, which gave us about 15 to 20 minutes before we had to begin again on the same loop, at this stage at least. This year, the casualty rate, surprisingly, was very low. A number of people with some minor injuries, and a couple with sore ankles and arms, but that's about all. Here we are finishing our first loop, and I can tell you at this stage we're pretty disgruntled.
We're out of petrol, mate. We're out of petrol. Right, okay. What else did we do? Yeah. Anything else sort of working? Everything else is crashing. Right. Can we move here?
It's amazing what a difference those few modifications were about to make to us. Now that Bill was driving and I was able to sit and watch for a while, I was firstly going to learn quite a lot. We'd run out of petrol, incidentally, because in the early rollover, some of the fuel had drained out of the tank. And it meant that with just about 10 kilometres to go, we had to potter along in fifth gear just to conserve enough fuel to make it at all. But removing the windscreen was a great advantage as far as we were concerned, because we no longer had the concern of flying glass. You can see what I mean by rough country. And you need plenty of ground clearance, which was one of the advantages as far as we were concerned. Isn't it funny how trees keep jumping out in front of people? At this stage, a number of competitors had retired, and strangely enough, wherever you stopped en route, it seemed there was always somebody there to come and give you a hand, someone who'd stopped before you. One of the difficulties about stopping to let somebody past was that it was often quite difficult to get going again, particularly in the very sandy country. Nevertheless, stop was something you had to do. By now, we were starting to have some confidence in the vehicle, and I was starting to have some confidence in Bill. You see what I mean? Motorcyclists were on the southern loop for their second run. And this was a piece of road that we were to encounter later on. I'm sure you can begin to imagine the physical demands of this sort of riding. And when you imagine that it went on for somewhere near 4 hours, you can see what I mean when I say that it was very tiring. It's amazing what you can do with a dune buggy. Provided you keep it balanced, it'll run on 3 wheels without any trouble at all. At the end of our second run on our first loop, we all had a lunch break, and the length of that lunch break depended pretty much on how early we'd finished. Some people had an hour or more, others had substantially less, and time for a few mechanical modifications. Kel Wern had literally no troubles with his brand new, specially imported Can-Am 175 Bombardier, except of course for the fact that with all of that dust, the air cleaners weren't doing such a good job. So he constantly replaced them and then carried on. By now I can tell you, Bill and I were feeling pretty good. Things were starting to work really well. No more rollovers, no running out of fuel, no flying glass.
What do we need?
Hey, don't rush, we've got 2 hours.
What do we like? We need
First gear.
What about it? Yeah, okay.
Oh, it's gone. I knew it came loose, but I didn't know it had gone altogether. I'll pick it up on the sleeve. Mate, there's no way that'll hold it down on that sort of road.
Okay, well.
I had a few trees that time. It was hard going, real hard going.
Like you really haven't seen anything in your life until you've seen some of that road.
I can believe it. It's just unbelievable.
While we were still lunching, the faster motorcyclists and the faster cars had begun the event all over again, but this time they'd swapped loops. Well, we're halfway. That's the morning session over. That's 2 runs on just one of the 2 loops. We have to attack the second loop this afternoon. I'm not sure how we're going, but we're doing fairly well, I would think. There are some minor problems with the motor car, certainly not in strength, but in preparation and development, because nobody knows too much about desert rallying, so we had to start from scratch. And I suppose if Datsun were to do it again, they'd go back to the drawing board, take a look at a few things and change them. But really, the vehicle performs very well, and most importantly of all, it's very strong. It doesn't look like breaking anything, and there are, at this moment, pieces of other sorts of motor cars strewn all over the track, and it's really quite amazing to see them lying about out there. It's very hard. There is no two ways about it. It's definitely the most physically demanding of any motorsport event that I've ever tackled, and I can see why it would be for the motorcyclists positively brain-snapping. The recorders were busy keeping track of all those competitors, and it was a credit to them that they were able to tell us that at this stage we'd lost 66 minutes. That compared with 20 minutes lost for Michael Baker, who was to eventually win the 4-wheel class, and 23 and a half minutes for Gary Flood, who ultimately won outright on a KTM 400 motorcycle. Once we got well into the second loop, we understood why it was that a car might have been leading. If the first loop was tough, the second loop was much tougher. But by now, we had a fair bit of confidence in the vehicle. We were pretty sure it was not going to brake or stop. And I'd learned a lot from watching Bill Evans. So now we were in a hurry. But then again, so was everybody else. Still, people were breaking down. Over the whole day, over 350 just didn't finish at all. So in fact, I suppose we could consider ourselves lucky that nothing very much broke that was important to us. Mind you, we lost our spare wheels, we lost part of the tailgate, a couple of mirrors fell off, and a few screws came loose. But the important components just stayed together. Trees were a hassle for us. They were an even greater hassle for the motorcyclist. If you hit one of those, you certainly know what it's all about. Every sort of vehicle gets into the BP Desert Rally. I think by now we really did have our act all together. This shot will give you an idea of what it was all about. This was a kind of insanity, but it was so much fun, it was unbelievable. This is Gary Baker, who's won the event on 5 successive occasions before this year, and this is Michael Baker, his brother, who took the title from Gary this year. Those people who were left in the event at this stage were still in a hurry. In fact, it's distinctly possible they were in more of a hurry now than they had been earlier in the day, because now it was starting to be significant. Here's Kell again, doing very well incidentally. He finished 10th outright and 2nd in his class. while some of the slower motorcyclists were just finishing their second last loop, the lead motorcyclists were on their way for the last time.
That's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and also the most fun. What else do you say? It's the most magnificent event I've ever contested in my life. It's unbelievable. Let's see more later though. We've got one more to go. We'll see how we go then.
And while we were preparing to make our attack on the last loop, the winners were coming home. They'd finished for the day. As it happens, as in all rallies, the first home is not necessarily the winner, because the significant factor is lost time overall. And although Gary Baker was in before Michael, it was Michael who eventually had lost the least time on the road. Driving on the last loop, and believe me, I was about to be in for the ride of my life. In this last loop, we passed 9 beach buggies. And we went almost anywhere at all to do it. Now we all know why they call him Wild Bill, but by now I was a bit wild myself. We'd finished and we'd done pretty well. 31st out of the 200 four-wheeled vehicles and 163rd outright. For my money, that was a pretty good achievement. The interesting thing is that if they asked me to do it again, tomorrow, I'd be there. Knowing now how tough it is, I have nothing but respect and admiration for the organisers and all the competitors, and very special respect for Gary Flood on the KTM 400, who won outright overall, and Michael Baker and John Spinks, who with their Sandmaster Panzer buggy were fastest of all the four-wheeled vehicles.
That's it for a year. How you feel that was great.
That was great.
I think we're a good team today.
I think we did him. Oh, mate, that's the greatest mind blow. I can't believe it. Who invented that event?
I don't know.
It wasn't a bad
But I think
idea,
it was
was it?
designed for motorbikes anyway.
7 years old the BP Desert Rally is, and if they've all been as good as that, I don't have any doubt it could go on forever. That was without doubt the most amazing motorsporting event I've ever taken part in my life. The best test of machine and man and components that you will ever see. And I reckon the most significant endurance test of all on us, because that's really heavy. But you sort of forget the fact that you've just broken your body in half, because it's just so good. And all you do when you finish is start planning next year's.